Let's do this. Hello, I'm Eagle Gardens, Eagle Gardens 1 on Instagram, and this is fucking Talking Shit with Eagle, episode 506. We've got an amazing guest tonight. Of course, you guys probably all know who this is, but in case you've been under a rock, this is Mr. Soul. He's back for a three-peat. Get to do a little bit of catching up with him. So, Mr. Soul, how you doing? And just in case they are under a rock, you want to tell them where they can find you?
Hello, Eagle Gardens. Oh, I heard a little bit of a echo there. Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for the nice introduction. Very kind. I'm the CEO, founder, breeder at Brothers Grimm Seeds. I started this company back in the 90s, around 97. In 1999, I released Cinderella 99, which was my creation, which I'm kind of best known for. And I don't want to elaborate on that too much, but just to bring everybody into like, oh, snap, this is who the guy is. Oh yeah, he's the Cinderella 99 guy. That's probably enough, right? And nowadays, in the last few years, I've kind of gotten to where I have a mastery of the feminized seed, and doing that type of thing has become my focus. And I have been making fem seeds now for the past 5 years or so, strictly without making any regulars at all. And this is, mainly an interest that I had, in the sense that I needed to figure out how to do this right when I could see that not many people knew how to do it right. So let me figure it out. And so, being a scientific guy, I've got a master's degree in engineering. I took the approach of, let's be scientific about this. Let me research how that's done, how sex is determined in organisms, and how all of that sort of thing works. And so I started touring the country, eventually going around and doing seminars on fem seeds. That was very well received. And since COVID started, I've stopped going to those events and doing those kinds of seminars, but there's a real good one of me that's been recorded on YouTube, and you can, look that up, Mr. Soul Fem Seeds, and it was in Boston, I believe, or at least in Massachusetts. So anyway, that's me. I'm making lots of seeds today for commercial growers who will buy like large lots of seeds, as well as keeping our website, which is, brothersgrimmseeds.com, where our regular menu is something that's always been popular. And we run a weekly special that we announce on Instagram and on our Facebook page as well, where we give away a free pack of seeds with every order, every seed order. Every week it's a new offering, and it rotates, over quite a long time, so you don't see a lot of repeats or anything. So people should keep an eye out for that. And I think we announced tonight where it was basically, I've been on twice already, so this will be number 3, and it starts to be, what are we going to talk about so that we don't repeat ourselves from before? And I told you, why don't you open it up to the audience? We can do an AMA, which, I think is kind of a new term. I heard that when I listened to Sam Harris, waking up and do meditation every morning, and he has AMAs once in a while, and it stands for Ask Me Anything. So I guess I'll sit here and you can ask me anything, and I'll sit back and field your questions if that's what you want, or if you want to hear a story about something, I'm more than happy to tell you stories.
Either or. We're just glad to have you. That's for sure.
Hey, man.
Yeah. Well, you want to tell us the story of Genius? I know you've probably told us that before, but it's a good place to start, I guess, why they're picking their brains on what they want.
Okay. Maybe that's because Genius, you bring it up. I did post a photo within the last week or so of Genius loaded with seeds being created. It's been pollinated by reverse C99, which would make the Apollo XX seeds, which is essentially the fem version of Apollo 11. Excuse me. And so Genius gets the name. Somebody even asked that in one of the comments on the picture. I think it's like, where'd you get the name? Why did you name this plant Genius? And it was because several friends and myself at the time, when I first grew out this plant, smoked it and said, it's got this really clear soaring sativa high that makes you feel smarter, like it's genius, in a smokable form. And so that name stuck, and I just called it Genius ever since. And then, just to put the genetics in its place historically, and, so that people who care about such things, Genius is the sister, meaning there's another female from the same batch of seeds that Princess came from. And Princess is the mother plant that was cubed to create the Cinderella 99 strain. And so now you can say, okay, well, then Genius is the sister of the mother of Cinderella 99. If that makes any sense, and if that's important to anybody, that's the correct lineage. So Genius has been, around all this time, and the seeds were popped in like 1996 or 7. So we're talking about a 25-year-old clone, and vigorous as ever. And, these two, Princess and Genius, they form the backbone of what I do with Brothers Grimm in creating the Cinderellas and the Apollo lines. And then, we have the Rosetta Stone, which won top 10 strain in 2018 from High Times Magazine. That's been a big favorite for a few years now. And we've since come out with Grimm Glue, which is basically like, Grimm Glue is a glue crossed to Cinderella 99. Cindy 99, makes a great hybrid parent, and almost anything that we get in, we usually start by, let's cross it to C99 and see what happens. And we just really hit it on the first fucking pass with that one. The GG4 and Cinderella 99 gave us Grimm Glue, which, you might say, well, what's the difference? Is it, well, maybe GG4s, why fuck with it, right? And I always found it was a little heavy on, how more like indica type of a high you got from the GG4, and the flavor. Many people like that gassy, skunky, it was just a little too aggressive for me to be puffing on that more than once or, in a day's time. I don't want to keep hitting the same. If you're on a road trip in a car, for example, what that's like when you only have just one type of weed in the console. And if it's something that like, this is just a little aggressive on the lungs and everything. Well, the Grimm Glue turned out to taste like cedar wood, like that aroma. That's a delicious aroma when you open somebody's cedar closet. They're designed to like keep the moths away from your wool sweaters or whatever the fuck it is. And so I love that aroma. And also the high was a little more, like the Cinderella 99 got in there and gave it a more uplifting, sparkling effect than just a sleepy couch lock. And then the lightening up of the skunkiness to make it more like a cedar wood, but still has that characteristic GG, Gorilla Glue flavor to it too. I've just been extremely popular and people love it. I'm also getting reports back from commercial growers that they're getting huge yields too, something like around 90 grams per square foot. Think about that. It's like over 3 ounces in a square foot of your canopy space. It's pretty big. So I'm happy as shit. This is a great time of year when, every client that I've had has already harvested their crops from outdoors, and, all the indoor growers have had a chance to run a cycle or two of my genetics in this past season or so. And I'm continually pleased. I get up every day. I'm happy to look on my computer, and I get really kind emails from people that are saying great things about the germination and the quality of the plants once they're growing, and this outdoor performance. I've got people in Maine and in Vermont, where I know it's hard to get the plants to be finished before the weather starts going bad. And these guys are calling me and sending me letters and saying, shit. 3 of your strains I grew this year outdoors, and every single one of them was done before the weather went sour. And I live in Vermont, or I live in Maine, and I'm like, I knew they were fast flowering, and I can't claim to have grown them everywhere, but feedback from people like that helps me be able to then pass that on to other clients who are interested in, like, have you ever had it grown, like way north, and what were those guys' results like, and what can we expect? And So that, what better source of feedback than, my own clients telling me their results. And then a lot of times I do the same thing at home, but of course I can't copy their conditions when it's an outdoor thing. But for indoor questions, typically if I give out testers, and of course I'm going to be growing my own batch of them too, and then I take their feedback and kind of do a sanity check, if you will, like, is what this guy's saying, does it sound consistent with what you're seeing in your little group that you're growing? And most of my stuff is very stable, so you don't see a lot of variation. And, so quite most of the time, most commonly, I'm getting guys writing me back, telling me the same kinds of things that I'm seeing in my group too. And then when you think about it, if you're testing seeds that are going to go out and be available to your clientele, what better way of testing whether they're good or not than giving them away for free to your clients to grow them and then report back to you whether they liked them or not, right? Because they're the very same people who would be buying the seeds once they are available on a commercial level. You know what I mean? They got their testers and they figured, okay, hey, if you ever make these in quantity, we like them, and that's the kind of feedback loop that helps me run Brothers Grimm in an effective way, where I know that I'm being pragmatic. I'm not just testing them in a way that isn't applicable to the client. In fact, it's the very clients that would be buying the seeds later that are telling me whether they like them or not. So if you do it that way, you only let go, and release the seeds people like, your clients are always going to be happy because they were the ones who told you they were good in the first place, right?
So is that the trend that you're seeing, that a lot of these larger scales are growing, that they're starting more and more from seed instead of, doing a pheno hunt, keeping mothers and cloning them out? It's just a better process for them to everything from seed.
Yeah, when you think about it, we're used to being closet growers and all underground, and I operated during the Prohibition period for decades, and so we all look at growing pot in our antiquated way. But when you think about on a commercial level, if you're running a company that's like got stocks on the stock market, and this is an actual CEO runs this company's big growing operations in multiple states and all these kinds of things, right? These guys are not going to do pheno hunts and play around like a bunch of frat boys with tents in their basements and shit. This is an actual enterprise they're trying to run now. So when you think about those big numbers and the expectation from stockholders and so on that you're going to perform, you need a reliable, predictable, repeatable methodology where you're not just shooting in the dark and hoping for some good luck every once in a while. These guys want to buy seeds because they're cheaper than clones, and they have the advantage, unlike a clone that's already a living, growing thing, the seed is in stasis, if you will, waiting for the day that you germinate it and say, okay, now go. This is the day I want to start these plants. So that ability to do that with seeds versus where, imagine trying to get thousands of clones delivered on the same day that are all around the same size, and you're going to start them all together like they're a uniform crop. It's really hard to do that, right? And you need a lot of space devoted to mothers and clones and all that effort and people and floor space that could be used for flowering in one of these big commercial grow houses. They don't want to waste the time and space on that, right? And manpower. So it's really a very high bang for your buck if you're starting with all fem seeds and you're doing that, by the thousands. My clients buy 10,000 to 50,000 to 100,000 seeds in a single order sometimes to these big commercial organizations. And so that's a huge advantage. The things I mentioned are huge advantages for them in running a predictable, repeatable, reliable kind of system, right? And then for me, the feedback I get from an organization like that, unlike, some smaller grouping of people or my own results from some kinds of tests. Population size is really important when you're doing statistics, right? I'm sorry, just drop back to make that point first and say that, small numbers of plants or anything that you're trying to do a statistical analysis on, if it's not a big enough population, they call that statistically insignificant, but you need a statistically significant number of samples to draw any big conclusions about the group, right, in statistics. And so for me, when I have buyers who have huge organizations with grows of tens of thousands of my seeds at the same time, that tells me their results are the true numbers to go by, because they grew a large population of the plants, and that's a statistically meaningful or significant number from which you can draw conclusions as to like what's the rate of germination, what's the flowering time, what is the difference between the earliest and the latest, those kinds of things, and intersex traits. I can say that in all of the work I've done to perfect my method of making female seeds, I feel super happy when I get these guys, because they come back and say, well, we grew 10,000 of your fem seeds. We didn't have any, males or hermaphrodites, which is of course what I expect. But like any scientist, you never can say, even take something as simple as like, well, every morning, the sun comes up. We can't guarantee it's going to happen tomorrow. As scientists, we can only just say that, like it's happened over and over enough times that we expect that it will, barring anything that weird that could happen. And, so I look to those big numbers from those guys to give me solid feeling for what was the performance of the plants. And they're getting 100% females from huge numbers, thousands and thousands of plants. And that makes me feel like, well, everything that I've believed and tested up to this point in the numbers that I could possibly generate on my own and with my other clients, the smaller ones, these big commercial grows have now like really put the stamp of like, okay, this worked. This is really working. And so I'm really proud to be able to say that those are the results. And you hear back from your clients also that they don't only buy seeds just from my company, they'll buy from other people. And they say, we did have trouble with other guys, but you seem to have nailed it. And, you're making pure female plants, and the quality of, the yield and the potency and terpenes and all those other things, we're well known for all of that already. So that's extremely gratifying, because I started out 5 years ago really feeling like a little trepidatious about should we try to make fem seeds, but I got so much, encouragement from the market saying we want them, that say, well, I'll only do it if I can do it right. And then I think I spoke to you a few times about, I don't want to bore everybody, but my biggest, I guess, eureka moment of understanding what was going on and why people were making fem seeds that really didn't make all females. They had a lot of Hermes in them, right? And I thought, well, maybe the chromosomal arrangement for a hermaphrodite was something other than the two X's that make a female or the X and the Y that make a male, right? Because this is something that's in between. And I thought it was the chromosomes at first, because I hadn't thought hard about it yet, right? But then this was the eureka moment when I realized that after I did some research in scientific journals and so on about what is the cause of hermaphroditism, and it turns out it isn't a chromosomal arrangement. These people or organisms who are sharing both male and female sex parts, those organisms are either XY or XX, just like everybody else. But here's the difference. there's a hormonal imbalance that causes the gender expression to be more female or male, depending on the presence or absence of a male or female hormone. And that's really easy to kind of self-check when you think about it. You say, all right, well, wait a minute, we have transgender people, right? And how do they move themselves and their gender expression toward the gender that they feel inside is who they are, right? Remember, think about it. What do? They take hormones. So it made perfect sense to me, like, okay, it's not a chromosomal effect, it's a hormonal effect. And if it's a hormonal effect, what's going on when these plants do Hermy, right? You have a female, looks like a female, and starts flowering, and you've seen some female flowers, but then, midway through or some part of the way through flowering, you start seeing male flowers pop up on what would have normally be thought was a female, right? That's a Hermy. Any plant that, was a female or looked like a female, and you expect it to be a female, but then it starts growing male flowers, and now you've got both male and female parts on the same plant, that's a Hermy, right? Well, if that's a hormonal reaction, right, and if that's caused by hormones, what exactly is going on? Well, what's going on is that either two things. One is that some plants, like from Thailand, right, they were just genetically predisposed to grow and then make both male and female flowers so that they would guarantee seeds to be produced. And that was just from that part of the world, conditions were such that evolution favored those kinds of plants, right? And so then that's one where it's just genetically programmed to be a Hermy, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it, right? But what about other plants that it's more when you fuck with them or they endure some kind of a stress? Most of the time it's a light cycle stress, like they didn't get the full 12 hours of darkness, it was interrupted, or it's irregular. And if you think about it, it's the light cycle, the photoperiod, that triggers flowering in the plant, in the cannabis plant in the first place, right? So if something's going to fuck with the gender expression as a stressor, the most stressful thing that can happen to the plant is light cycle irregularities, right? And so that's how you test a plant that you think is a female to make sure it isn't actually a Hermy, is you light cycle stress it. And that's either going to happen because of problems you're having in your garden, or just that you grow it, that clone, long enough that it's seen all kinds of conditions and it's never Hermied, and you just know, okay, this plant, it's been female for so fucking long. I know this is a pure female and it's not Hermy, right? So what about making fem seeds now, right? You don't mind if I keep continuing this dialogue? It's a I think that I've explained this in so long and so for such a long time, I feel I can put it simply now and make it comes off like a fireside chat or something, right? And so we're at the point now where we realize that, plants Hermy either because they react to stress by creating male flowers, their hormones get all up in a rage, right? Or they're just genetically predisposed from evolution, that they grew up in a part of the world where that was favored and they're just naturally hermaphroditic. So we don't want to deal with the naturally hermaphroditic ones because obviously you're going to fucking keep breeding that into the next generation, right? So what we try to do is we're trying to find pure females that won't Hermy under stress, right? And that would be a great female to then use it as a pollen donor on another female that also proved itself that it isn't hermaphroditic either, right? And then that other plant can be the female and this one can be reversed, and then we'll pollinate the female, and then we're making a hybrid cross between these two plants. And problem is, how do you get the pure female if it won't Hermy and it won't make male flowers? How are you ever going to get it to give you pollen to then pollinate the other plant, right? There's a catch-22. It's like, shit, I thought I had this figured out, right? I was at that point where I was like beating myself up mentally, walking around at that time, I might have been in Central Park in New York City. I was probably walking around or riding my bicycle. I'm thinking like, well, how do you, so here's the problem. It made it clear what everybody had been doing wrong, right? When they were trying to make fem seeds, they were stressing a female and saying, oh, great, voila, I stressed this female and it made male flowers and now I can get pollen and I'm going to make fem seeds. But wait a second, you just validated this plant is actually a hermaphrodite. It responded to stress by making male flowers. That's not what we want, right? Because that just shows that it's in the genes. This plant's got to probably pass that on to his progeny, and you're not going to get only fem seeds. You're going to get fem seeds and a lot of hermaphrodites too. So what you really want to do is you want to be able to breed with a pure female that doesn't hermy. But the problem is, it's like, well, shit, if it doesn't hermy, how am I going to get male flowers on the fucker so that I can get any pollen out of it and to pollinate the other plant? And so that's when I had to dive a little deeper into the research and the scientific journals and look at, what kind of research that scientists have done on, the hormonal effects, the gender expression that we talked about earlier, right? And I said, well, okay, so here's what's happening. If you follow the chain of causes, like the causal chain, I guess you would call it, from a hermaphroditic plant is being stressed by some external stresses, light cycle imbalances, things like that, right, that we talked about. And the reaction to the stress is for it to have then a hormonal reaction that makes it make male flowers, right? It either suppresses the female hormone or accentuates the male hormone, whatever, at that time, and you're thinking, you're doing a thought experiment to try and figure this out. You don't know which of those it is, but as it turns out, it's the repression of the female hormone that causes the male flowers to form. And that repressed female hormone is a reaction to stress that plant is just genetically programmed to do. And that's what makes it a hermaphrodite, right? Because if we can all just stop for a second and say, what's the definition of a hermaphrodite? It's a plant that under stress produces male flowers on what would have been a female plant, right? And so if a stressed female plant produces male flowers, it's a hermy. But if it doesn't, then it makes a great pollen donor to create fem seeds. The only problem is, how do we make pollen on it when it doesn't make male flowers in response to stress? Well, here's what we do. We jump right over, like, what's that game with the hopscotch, leapfrog, right? We leapfrog right over that first thing, which is the stress that caused the hormones to, the hormones, kind of an accent is that. So you leapfrog over the fact that the plant isn't being stressed. And the next step in the causal chain, remember, was the hormones would then suppress the female hormone, and male flowers will then grow on what would have been a female plant. Well, here's what we can do. We can find plants that don't respond to stress by making male flowers, but we can then hormonally induce male flowers to grow on that plant. It doesn't have to be stress induced. You follow? So that you take away the stress part of it and go right to the hormone part of it. And by using a silver spray like colloidal silver or silver thiosulfate, what that will do is it inhibits the hormone, the female hormone in the plant, and then male flowers will grow on what would have been a female plant, even though that isn't a hermaphrodite. And here's where the real magic comes. When pollen from that plant now lands on another female that has also been proven not to be a hermaphrodite, neither parent has the gene for hermaphroditism. And so now you've got a pollen with X chromosomes landing on female flowers that have X chromosomes, and all the seeds are going to have XX chromosomes. That's why I call a lot of my fem seed strains like Rosetta Stone XX or Cinderella XX. The two X's are for two X chromosomes that a female has, right? And so that's how you make female seeds that are 100% pure female without hermaphrodites. You just don't breed with hermaphrodites. And it takes a vetting process of, testing and stressing plants to be sure that this is really a true female before you then go ahead and hormonally induce it to be a pollen donor to make seeds, right? And I'll say one more time, the receiver of the pollen, that plant also has to have been vetted for not being hermaphrodite, or else you have the same problem, but it's just coming from the other parent, right? Okay, so there's a little juicy thing to chew on, I guess, and food for thought for some folks, and maybe a repetition of something that other folks already knew.
So I have a question as far as the nanner donation goes there. Now, I can understand if one shows up, say, mid-flower, due to overfeeding can sometimes make a strain stress and throw a banana at some points mid-flower. And if lighting leaks, as it mentioned, both of those you say would be bad pollen because they kind of put forth that bad gene. But what about a plant that's went like full term and then some, and is kind of thrown out that one or two nanners in the natural process just to kind of save itself? Is that pollen we're saving?
I don't think you should save that pollen, but the one thing that, I can say about a situation like that where you have plants that they only really throw a nanner in the last couple days or a week. If you think about that from, again, I go back to me being a very pragmatic guy. That means like I'm only interested in the results and I'm not so worried about the window dressing, right? That's what pragmatism is. So I'm results oriented. I'm looking at, okay, you have a flowering room and you've got a few plants that threw a couple of nanners toward the end. What's the worst thing that can happen? A little bit of that pollen gets on some of the plants and they're going to be fucking cut down in 3 or 4 days anyway. And it will have zero effect on them. And most of the time, the pollen from those late nanners is actually sterile. So a lot of times it won't even make seeds, even if you did collect it and try to sprinkle it on other plants. I don't know why, but that's often the case, right? Let's say, though, it isn't the case, and you did want to collect some pollen from those late nanners on those plants. Aren't you still sort of saying, well, this pollen came from what was a female plant that made male flowers at the end of its flowering cycle? Is that really a trait you want to pass on to the next generation and possibly have it happen earlier in the flowering cycle? Maybe the more you breed with that, the more earlier it starts happening. You know what I mean? That's very likely. So yeah, I would avoid, there's so many great plants to really breed with. Why does anybody say, I'm taking this one, it's kind of got problems and so on and so forth? They're not fixer-uppers. I mean, it's not like you're buying a house and you can just put new siding on it because it looks like shit on the outside. This is a fucking organism that you're going to take its DNA and pass it on to the next progeny, to the next generation of seeds, and you're going to grow them, and they need to be of quality for you to rely on, right? Why goof around with anything that you're not absolutely sure about? And that's why, just seeds and genetics in general are such a great bang for your buck. If you're a typical home grower or a guy who's just growing a couple of packs of seeds and that's enough for him to do his thing, what did you really spend on the genetics? About the same as maybe one of the lights that's hanging over the fucking plants. And, those things burn out and you buy a new lamp bulb, right? And without thinking about it. And yet you'll see sometimes people thinking like, those seeds are a little expensive. I don't know if I should pay a little more for that. The genetics is the most important thing that's going to affect the outcome of the garden, isn't it? I mean, everything else is just environment, right? I say that all the time. Genetics is the most important thing. Everything else is just environment. And I use a ridiculous example to make the point. Like, What if you have everything dialed in just right? You got perfect soil, you got great CO2 in the air, the light intensity is just perfect, the light frequency and everything. You got an ideal environment, but you planted celery seeds. The weed is going to suck when you harvest that shit, right? I mean, think about it that way. The seed or genetics that you're putting into that environment is what's going to really determine the outcome, right? None of this other shit, like, oh, this LED or this. People love to go on, they get gas. Have you ever heard of gas? GAS? It's gear acquisition syndrome, where, it's a gee whiz factor. That's why everybody within the first 6 months of starting to grow pot, they want to do it hydroponically, right? You don't know shit about what you're doing yet, and you want to do this in the most, complex way. It's just, kids will be kids, they want the latest toys, and it's like the gee whiz factor of something, that seems a little more complex. But you're better off keeping it simple, stupid, right? There's always that saying. So I don't know if I finished a thought there or if I left something hanging, but you let me know.
You sure did.
I did.
Mr.
What did I
Holt
forget?
in chat?
What was I about to tell you?
Please.
What did I forget to tell you?
You didn't forget to tell me anything. I believe you covered everything.
I could have sworn you said.
And here in chat, Mr. Hort says, love how you stick to your classic seed library, but do you feel the pressure to make hybrids with current hype cultivars?
Yeah, that's really something that on one level, you say there's a pressure. Let's say there's two different pressures. There's a pressure coming from the distributors of the seeds and the retailers and, people who make money by taking the product and getting it out into the public. And they're feeling a pressure too. This is the second pressure. Their pressure is coming from those people who they perceive to be like, all our buyers are, like writing us and asking for the latest hype strains, right? And so they're telling me, this is the first pressure, to make more, like, can't you get your hands on a gelato, or, why don't you breed with the wedding cake, And so there's that pressure. And if I buckled into that all the time, the impression that I would give to my clientele, I like to call them, people who buy the seeds, would be kind of like, Jesus, Soul is all over the place. He's, drifting with the wind, and whatever new hybrid is hot, he just jumps on the bandwagon and crosses it to C99 and releases it. I don't want to get that, I don't want to be that guy. I'm not that guy. It's not who I am. I mean, I have to see something that really gets my attention, and I'll say, holy shit, that looks like it'd be really worth getting a clone and doing a little breeding and testing and see where that goes. And I felt that way a couple of years ago about the Mac 1, remember? I mean, was it 2 or 3 years ago? I got that. I've been breeding with it, if you can call it that, because it hasn't been very successful, and nobody's very successful breeding with Mac 1. I make a joke about it, because maybe the reason why when you try to breed with Mac 1, you can never get anything that's any better than Mac 1 is because it's kind of like the definition of perfect. When something's perfect, any change from that point is downhill, right? You don't get better than perfect. And like the Mac 1 is almost like this perfect fucking clone that makes this incredible great weed with an amazing terpene profile, just covered in resin, great yield if you grow it right, but it is fussy. And there's a lot of little things about growing it that, it takes a while to really know how to get the best performance out of it. And, if you follow the calculator and his, I think he calls it the basement or the cellar or something, and he's got a great group of people who follow him and have a underground forum of some sort that, he makes you jump through a few different hoops to be able to qualify to be part of his little gang and everything, which is cool. I don't know how he finds the time and the energy to, give as much of himself as he does, but kudos to him. He's really hardworking and very caring, kind person. So hats off to him. And I drifted off the subject a little bit here, but yeah, the hype strains and stuff like that, I tend to feel like I don't want to be that guy. That's not who I am. But if I see something that I really think that makes sense, let's do it. I started Vic High, who's passed on, rest in peace. My old colleague up in Canada from back in the day. We used to have many conversations and debates back and forth on the primitive internet that it was at the time in the late 90s. So a lot of the writing still exists from him and I going back and forth over breeding questions and so on. And people will bring that up to me sometimes. And so it's out there, you know. Anyway, going back to Vic High, he had the Romulan. This was a clone that he was working with, you know, and it was his sort of, you know, baby. And eventually Subcool got one of the offspring from the Romulan crossed to C99, and he ended up calling that Space Queen, right? And so if you know anything about TGA and his seed company, Subcool started with this Space Queen male. He called it Space Stud or something like that, right? You know? Anyway, so that was like his male that he used to make a lot of the strains that he eventually released as, you know, seed strains and so on. And so obviously those were regular seeds, and Vic is gone now. And I got a little bit of, you know, in a conversation back and forth with the folks that worked with Subcool before he died, you know, Vic and Victoria and Will, they're great people. And so we stay in touch and talk a lot. And they said, you know, if you could get your hands on a Romulan, the real Romulan, and you have your C99, you could make the Space Queen again. And I said, yeah, I would be making it, but it'll be a femme version this time. And they're like, all the better, you know. So now that's a new thing that is coming out. And we had testers went out a few weeks ago, Romulan C99 femme. So we're calling them Space Queen XX, of course. And so I'm making more of those. They should be available around Christmas time or New Year's. But we did like enough to do 20 or 30 packs of seeds from that first run. And so there's something new. Now, one more comment on the Mac 1 breeding and stuff, just real quick, because it's kind of fits into the category the gentleman was asking about there, you know, breeding with hype strains and stuff. Like, I really like that Mac 1 so much that I just really worked hard for a couple of years now, and I'm finally reaching a point where my expectations have been lowered greatly, and I don't expect too much. But one of the problems with it, if you don't already know, I'll just quickly explain the major issues with the Mac 1 clone. And one is that when it's attempted to be pollinated, like say you're trying to make seeds on the Mac 1 female clone, it rejects the pollen in the sense that, like, it can be hit with a lot of pollen, but it just won't make that many seeds. It's got, here's a perfect example. I just harvested a room where I did put a Mac in there, knowing that it probably won't make many seeds, but it's only one plant, you know, it's not taking up the whole room. You know what I mean? Let me see what happens. So I had one of those Romulans that I was just talking about a moment ago in the middle of the room. And I had a Mac 1 on the perimeter of the room. And I had the pollen donor basically sitting right next to the Mac 1, dumping pollen for a week, you know, and saturating this plant sitting next to it with pollen. And then the Romulan is about maybe 3 or 4 feet from there. In the end, when I harvested the seeds from those two plants, and they were virtually the same size plants. So it's not like the Mac was really small or, you know, the Romulan was really big or anything. They were basically identical sized plants. The Romulan put out almost 3,000 seeds in one plant. The Mac 1 produced 40 seeds, 40. 40 seeds on the entire plant. It was sitting right next to the pollen donor getting dumped with pollen, right? So this is how ineffective as a breeder the thing is. Like, so suppose you think like, Well, the seeds that do come out of that are really good, and that's true. I mean, the Mac 99 seeds I've gotten pretty good results from, which is rare because usually you cross the Mac 1 to something and the result is that you get a plant that's all mutated and twisted and weird and has problems. But with the C99, it seems to work pretty well. But there's, again, the main problem is you can't make enough seeds to really sell them. You know, there's a few that you could hand out to your buddies or something every once in a while or something. Say, hey, check this out. You know, grow these. They're really rare, you know, because they are. So, funny stories about, you know, cannabis plants. What else want to talk about?
Well, I guess that answers the question for one of them anyway.
Yeah,
Ford
I'm
was
sorry.
asking if any of the Mac crosses ever got released.
No, I don't think I could possibly make enough seeds to actually put them in packages and spend any money on, you know, marketing and packaging them. You know, it might be something where Brothers Grimm is doing a raffle or something where we're raffling off a handful of packs of Mac 99 or something like that, or you can maybe win it for doing something. Who the hell knows? We'll think of something. I find it's really good to be generous with the cannabis community. It's like bread on the water. It always comes back. I kind of say more seeds I give away, the more I sell, you know, just works that way.
I agree with that 100. Hemp with Gigi would like to know your favorite way to test strains for stress. For her.
They must have missed that earlier section when we were here talking about how I send them out, you know, and the clientele is testing. And so this way I have a small, you know, sampling of them that I'm testing at home. And then the other growers that got the test seeds are my actual clientele, you know, and they're out there growing them and feeding back to me and telling me what, you know, hopefully we're all seeing the same thing, you know, the same phenotypes and the same kinds of terpenes and THC levels and things like that, you know. So that's how I like to test them. Like I said, again and again, I'm a pragmatist. I really only care about the results. That's the main thing. I don't care about window dressing, you know, and shining, you know, anything. It's just get the right result. That's what it's all about, right? So that's how I test. And if they meant like, well, how do you stress test your plants? You know, again, earlier we were talking about varying the light cycle and doing weird things like, you know, it's supposed to be 12 hours of darkness, and that's what's going to initiate flowering in a cannabis plant. So fuck with that, you know, start with it normal for a few days or a week, and then leave the lights on for 24 hours and then go back to 12-12 again, you know, something like that that's disruptive of the pattern. And then if that's a plant that has the natural, you know, genetic tendency to be a Hermy, that'll be one of the most likely things to trigger it, right? And if you're in a, you know, if you're growing and your growing conditions are imperfect in some way that may affect the plant, whether it will show hermaphroditism or not, that fault in your system is likely to be something to do with the light cycle, right? So either you've got light leaks, you've either got, you know, a timer that's fucking up and coming on for half an hour in the middle of the night. You know, I've seen that happen. And then you're going to see like, oh, okay, those are the kinds of stresses that will tell you whether you got a Hermy or not. Okay, so now I think I've probably answered both ways that question could have been interpreted.
I think you definitely have covered it very well there. Strong Style Organics wants to know, is there any other strains other than recent stuff that you're interested in?
It's out there in the world. Like, you know, do I look at the hype strains sometimes and go like, damn, what's this Runts thing? You know, like that name kind of almost sounds derogatory. Like, you know, I would never use that as a name for a strain, but I guess it's alluding to, is it a cartoon program or is it like a candy that you buy in the drugstores or something? I don't know what runts are, but it sounds like something small, right? A runt, right? And so as a name for a strain, I would look at that and go like, oh, no, don't use that. People will think they don't grow very big, you know what I mean? They want big yields and stuff. I don't want any runts, you know? So I guess I get confused as an older guy, you know, and I'm not, you know, running around 30-year-olds and that get excited about these things, and things are, their world, things are changing faster, and things have slowed down a bit for me, and I'm a little more reflective and slower moving, and I tend to be a little more thought goes into something before I get myself up and put a little energy into it. But I see, and again, you know, the pressures I talked about from people who are retailing my seeds, and they want, you know, to have offerings that people want and sell more, and they still think, you know, well, we did get some Kush mints, so hey, house secret, you know, I haven't really said anything about that. I got Kush mints, and I've been growing that out, and I have to say that in veg it looked really kind of skinny and vine-like, and I was a little worried that this thing isn't going to yield worth shit, you know. And then lo and behold, we flowered out some of this here Kush mints, and it turned out that the nugs kind of grew like golf balls, you know, like, and they're spaced out. It's not like a cola where everything's all connected like an old school, you know, classic marijuana, you know. But it was very frosty, very potent. I mean, I took a couple hits off of it when we harvested it and dried them sitting there. So I wouldn't be surprised if this shit tests at 30%. It's fucking fire and really knock you on your ass. You've got a really strong stone from it. And we haven't bred with it yet, but you know, that's the first step of anything. So if the gentleman or lady who's asked the question, I can kind of address it in the sense that if I do get interested in something, and like we see a company that has a strain we like, and tell them, you know, we're obviously Brothers Grimm, and we're interested in maybe growing out that strain of yours, and if we find a good keeper, we'll make seeds from it, and you know, we'll let you know how we do with all of that. You know, same as anybody would do if they bought my seeds. And there's they're going to use it to breed with. And of course, I can't say you shouldn't do that or can't do that. I mean, who am I to? They're your seeds now, right? It's your plant. You brought the seeds from me. How can I ever expect to have the control over somebody to stop them from, you know, doing that? So anyway, going back to the subject, say I'm interested in some new strain, I'll acquire it either by clone or seed. And then the next step is to grow it out and flower it at least a couple of times and see what kind of qualities might I like to extract from this strain and bring them into a union with another plant that would complement it and produce something that, now here is a rule for me. Whenever I'm making a new variety, I won't release a variety of seeds unless the offspring is an improvement over the parents, right? Because why would you do that? If you can just, either one of the parents happens to be better than the offspring, you just be growing one of the parents and not the offspring, right? Again, pragmatism. I'm interested in the results. So just like with the Mac, that makes a great example where the progeny from the Mac is never, ever as good as the Mac itself. So here you are with given the opportunity, or, you know, you have the options of, you're going to run a grow room right now and fill it with a number of plants, whatever number that might be. And you could either have them all be clones of Mac 1, or you could have them be the seeds from her having been crossed to something else that's inferior, you know. And so what am I, an idiot? I would fill the room all with just Mac 1 clones. You know, what's the point of growing the offspring if they're not as good as the mother, right? So my rule is when I'm breeding, I'll grow those plants and test them for what I think are their qualities and see if there's something that in my little breeder mind, I think like, you know what, that'll really complement this one. And, you know, let's see. And then when we grow out the results, if it is indeed an actual improvement, like Rosetta Stone is a better version of what was Jack Herer, right? Jack Herer has certain negative qualities as well as a lot of great qualities, right? But when you take the Jack Herer and you say to yourself, well, you know, if I could wave a magic wand and like tighten up the buds a little, keep all of the great resin and flavor, and make it be a little more earlier flowering. And if I bought a pack of Jack Herer seeds, it'd be nice if they all kind of grew the same pheno instead of being like 7 different possibilities there in every pack. So uniform plant result, tighter colas, maintaining all of the flavor and resin production and so on. That would be my little breeder's goal, right, for improving Jack Herer. And when I did do that with originally as a regular seed using the P75, and then eventually we reversed C99 on it and made the Rosetta Stone XX, and it hit all of those boxes. And so I can feel, you know, okay, we've created a seed line here, a variety that is an improvement over the mother, that this is what we were trying to do. So that probably answers a few people's questions that circulated. A few of them kind of circulated around that same subject matter.
They want to know, are Genius Princess or Calf Girl cuts still around?
What kind of cut?
Genius Princess or Calf Girl?
Oh, Cafe. Yeah, Cafe Girl. Cafe Girl was not, I don't believe, ever circulated, never got out of the house back when I first, you know, was working with it. And I did make a few things like ginger ale was one of the strains that came out of that. And we didn't keep it. So it was like, you know, when you have 3 females from a group of seeds, and, you know, when you're working back in Prohibition times and you don't have all the space in the world to keep every mother that you think has some, you know, potential, Genius and Princess were such head and shoulders better variety, you know, better clones than the Cafe Girl was, that I didn't keep Cafe Girl. So I don't recall, and I'm pretty positive that I never gave away any clones of it. But Genius, I did let others have clones of it. Princess, obviously, I don't want to have somebody being able to, you know, make Cinderella 99 for themselves. You know, that's my I don't know, patented thing, I guess, you know, if you want to look at it that way. But I did, of course, have to let some trusted friends have that Princess during the time when I wasn't working, and I had to be away from doing my thing. So now that's kind of tightened up. The people that did have it are either, you know, giving it back to me and stopped growing it themselves, or they're dead now, or don't forget I'm 62, so some of the people I used to run with aren't around anymore. Some left the business, some they just died of either natural causes or got killed or something. So it's a crazy.
You look amazing for your age, brother.
I feel fantastic. I mean, it's just good genes. I mean, you probably can't tell I'm sitting down and everything. I don't have a big fat belly here. My arms are, you know, my muscles and everything. I stay in good shape because I run a farm here. I've got a small ranch here in Colorado, and I take pride in just going out and doing everything myself, you know, fixing fences and feeding animals and hauling their feed back and forth and all that kind of stuff. And of course, working with the plants, you're mixing soil, you're transplanting, you know, it's a lot of hand work. And so, yeah, thanks. I'm probably beating in my chest a little too much here. Excuse me. I don't want to go a little too far overboard.
Wants to know if you got the Romulan cut from Vic High or the NorCal cut.
It was the Vic High cut because eventually it came by way of the TGA people. And then they had, well, one of my good friends was friends with them too, and he had it, so he sent it to me. So that's how I have it. That would be the Vic High cut. I didn't know there was anything else.
Honcho 360 would like to hear about the creation of Apollo.
Apollo is just, unlike Cinderella 99, where I took Princess and I wanted to actually make a seed representation, a way of replicating that plant with a seed. For whatever reason, it can't, it was my desire to do that back at the time. I guess it was because I was feeling, like so proud and happy that I had this particular individual female that was producing such amazing pot, in the sense that, the high and the flavor were also excellent. And it was a compact plant that didn't, outgrow the grow room like most sativas would. I guess that's the point. It was like producing a sativa result, but on a short, compact plant. Like, it was the best of both worlds. And I thought, we were on the internet at that time and message boards and talking to each other and using, what do you call that? Crypto? Not, I don't mean the currency, you know what I mean? It's so that when you send messages, they're encrypted. Yeah, encryption. That's what. So we were using encryption on the messages and everything. Because, at that time it was prohibition and everybody was paranoid. You could do 20 years in prison, if they caught you with a basement full of plants or something, And I was doing this in Massachusetts, up in Revere, Boston area. And so during that time on the message boards, where the hell was I? Talking about on the message boards, we sharing, and I felt like, while describing this great plant, it was like making all the other guys salivate and like, well, I wish I had that too. And so I thought, like, what would be a really cool thing would be if I could make a seed line that replicated this plant, so that I don't have to just give cuts of the plant. People can just buy seeds that grow up and they're just like this, And so the thought that came to me was, I think I read an old High Times article that was just one of these like half-page articles where they just loosely talked about this idea of cubing the clone. And I think that was the article's title and everything. Somebody could, maybe one of the nerdier people out there, no offense, because I'm a nerd too, could like research that and say, like, wasn't there an old High Times magazine that had an article in it called Cubing the Clone? I read that, I don't know when, but it stuck in the back of my mind. And when I had this idea, like, how could I replicate this plant in a seed form, And the idea was, if you take a female that you really like I had this Princess, right? And you cross it to a male, and the seeds that are produced from that cross are now 50% of your original female that you like, right? It's also 50% of the male that you introduced to make the seeds, right? So then what happens if you take those seeds and grow them and then find a male from that generation and cross it back to the clone, right? The original clone that produced the seeds in the first place. So think about that. You're taking seeds that are 50% of the original female. Mine was called Princess, so I designated it like with a P, right? So if you think about that first generation, I could call them P50s for 50% of Princess, right? Does that make sense? Right? So Princess crossed with any given male, that first cross, the offspring are going to be 50% Princess. You get half your genes from your mother and half from your father, right? That's not difficult to follow. Now, here's the next step. If one of those seeds that grew up and became a male was allowed to flower and pollinate the original female, she would again would contribute 50% of her genes to the offspring, right? But remember, this male that she's just been crossed with, he had 50% of her genes in him too. So half of that is 25% of Princess is coming from the male now, and the 50% that's coming from the original female. So now this next generation is P75. There's 75% P. Now, if you do that one more generation, you're adding it to, it'll come to P88. And you do it one more time, it'll be P94. And then the last step is crossing the P94 male back to that original female. And now you've got 97% P in those seeds. So what you've done is basically like faded away any of the effects of that original male, and each generation becomes more and more like their mother. And now they're being bred back to their mother each time. And so now you've got seeds that are essentially all that one female's genes in the seed line. And so consequently, when you grow them out, they look and act just like their mother, you know. And eventually I'm now doing that with a fem version as well. So that's the name of that tune. And that's how Cinderella 99 was created. Now he wanted to know about Apollo. So I'm so sorry. At least I remember the original question. So I'm coming back to that. Yeah. I did a cross of Genius to one of the steps in the progression that created Cinderella 99. It was the P75. Okay, remember when we were at that point? It was like the second generation. So that a male from that second generation pollinating Genius created Apollo 13. Okay. And so then that was a popular strain, but there was some variation. They weren't all like clones of each other or anything. There was a little bit of variety, but people liked the variety because they varied from, you know, excellent to good to outstanding, and they were all over the place. But people said Apollo 13, Apollo 13. They really liked it. So I thought I'll go one better, and I'll cross that Genius to C99 instead of the P75, and that became what eventually was we called Apollo 11. Okay, and so I feel because of the more uniform plants and the quality of the plants, the Apollo 11 was the preferred result between Apollo 13 and Apollo 11. People will still ask me to this day, you know, like, why did you discontinue Apollo 13? I really liked that. And please try the 11. You know, that's why it was discontinued, because Apollo 11 was intended to be its replacement. And now Apollo XX is the fem version of Apollo 11, where we reverse the C99 and it's a female pollen pollinating the Genius to make the Apollo XX. So there's the Apollo story too. And I guess I can kind of look at like the spaceman tattoo as a little bit like influenced by my Apollo ideas and stuff, where Cinderella 99 is the pinup girl.
So I was gonna ask a little bit later about this. You have you have quite a few tattoos marking, you know, your personality, some of your likes and everything. But the only one I haven't seen is something that represents or reflects the scientific side of you. Is there something that hits there?
Well, you know, I'm a nuclear engineer, right? So I see there's a space back here where I can have an atomic symbol, a nucleus, and the atoms going around it and stuff. I'm thinking like probably that'll be there. I mean, I can tattoo little, you know, mathematical symbols here. E to the I pi plus 1 equals 0, or, you know, E equals MC squared or some shit.
That would be really cool.
Schrodinger's equation, you know, for the wave function of for quantum physics. That would be a funny one. And then, well, anyway, if we're talking tattoos, are we still talking tattoos?
We are still a little bit talking tattoos.
Jimi Hendrix
over show
them. Yeah, because I love playing guitar, and so Hendrix is one of my big favorites. And I was telling you earlier before the show started, I'd like to get more musical artists on this arm, you know. Anyway, why now? You know, I'm 60 and I'm getting some tattoos because I guess I was a cautious younger man who wasn't ready to commit, you know, and I had to think about what do I really want on my, knowing that it's there for life, you know. I guess that there's less risk now that there's only less than 50 years left.
Who are some of your
being pretty
musical
optimistic. Being pretty
influences?
optimistic. Who knows what scientific advances might lengthen our lives a little bit more. I feel pretty fortunate. I've been living a pretty charmed life. Things have been good. And I'm now in my 60s, so I can look at it like I've already lived the life of two 30-year-olds, right? I'm on my third 30-year-old. Like another possibly
I seen
30
a comment
years.
in chat that said
30
they don't
years.
think you've. There's a comment in chat that says they don't think you've aged in 10 years easily.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, the kind person who's saying that.
I have to agree. So Ned Denver in chat would like to know, did you ever make any crosses with the Green Avenger or continue it any further? And one more from me, do you plan to ever remake it for a nostalgic state?
I could, but again, now that Subcool's gone and it was a tribute to him in the first place, there is a little something scratching in the back of my head here where I might consider making another version of that again. We took Vortex and crossed it to Genius, I believe is how we created that one. You have to refresh my memory. It's been a little while. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it was, we had Genius, because he loved Genius. He even wrote in his book a little story about how high he and his friend got once when they first got the little package of Genius Bud that I'd sent him. And they both ran into some like convenience store or something and got lost in there. And then like one of those times where you're so freaking high that you tell stories about it for the rest of your life. I can remember being in my teenage years and, when you first start getting high and it's almost like a hallucinating event. I remember getting so high a couple of times, and I wish I could still get that high, and I don't anymore, but back in those days. So, there's got to be some lightweights out there that are still having those experiences every fucking day, even if it's passed us by,
I'd like to see it. I would just like to say if it does get remade for any good reason, that it just stays available from you. That's a Brothers Grimm exclusive.
I know I have some Quirkle. I've got some Quirkle seeds probably right here in my drawer, and that would be worth like fooling around with. Yeah, see, this is Quirkle on it. I don't know. Can you see it now? I got it backwards. Quirkle. So there's some Quirkle seeds that if I worked with that, I remember that being nice, heavy indica, and we grew it outdoors and flowered out the last mom of that the year he died. And I might be inclined to go that way more than the Green Avenger. But that Green Avenger was fire. It was amazing because it seemed like looking at it when it was growing, we were not that impressed, thinking like, geez, its resin production isn't that visually obvious. But when we harvested it and dried it and smoked the bud, it was like, what the hell? This shit is strong. Get you really very high. And then it was like, where's that coming from? It didn't look that impressive, but it's one of those, Nobody's got questions on what it's like to be in a legal world after working in the Prohibition period for so long or anything else. I mean, we hear a lot of those stories from other OGs and old, guys that have been around a long time, if I can use that term without sounding conceited. Anyway,
I like to think that it's made things more boring, to be honest with you. It's exciting and boring all at the same time, the new frontier. Yeah. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but it's nice to not have that stress and the hanging over your head thinking like you could be put away for 20 years if anybody catches you, And I was divorced at the time and I'd have my children on weekends and vacation times. And if their mother ever was, to know what I was doing, and it would be just a huge scandal in my personal life, as well as prison and everything else, and all the fucking negatives that go with it. Now, the downside is, of course, you're paying taxes on your income, and it's all like above boards. And in a certain way, that's a great feeling of comfort, and you feel like, hey, nobody can bother me. I'm doing this by the book, and in a legal state, producing my products with a license and everything else, and paying taxes. So that's kind of interesting. It's a different world, but I do prefer it, and I guess I've been all my life rooting for this to happen, and against the protestations of older people when I was a younger person, and who were telling me, like, if you think this is ever going to be something you can do, as make a living or anything, it's never going to be legal. And I mean, I have a few things to say on that subject anyway, just in general, as philosophically. Why has it always been that, the FDA or these governing bodies can't look at something that's so obvious to any 17-year-old kid that this is a safe substance and no harm really can come from it, especially as compared to alcohol and tobacco? And if they're legal, it's almost like, the sign at the fair where, you have to be at least this tall to get on this ride. And like marijuana is like way under the fucking bar, and they're letting fucking tobacco and booze go, even though they're like twice the size of the fucking sign. And it's like, wait a minute, everything's out of fucking kilter here. It just seemed to me like logic will have to one day prevail. This is, you can't bury the truth forever. And, when we really look into the political reasons and things, there were forces at work in like the Nixon administration, where these paranoid politicians were thinking, like, people smoke marijuana, they start to loosen up and realize that, like, well, fuck, they've been lying to us about this. I wonder what else they've been lying to us about, And so it was kind of like a genie in the bottle that they didn't want to let out. And there was always this excuse from these bodies that I just mentioned, like the FDA or whatever, like, well, we can't make marijuana legal because, there hasn't been enough testing on it, but, well, then how is it possible that you release these drugs that, in 6 or 8 months or a couple of years, boom, they're out. And when you listen to the TV and they have a drug commercial come on now, everybody can probably recognize this and identify with it, but isn't it true that they'll talk about this drug like it's some wonder drug, and it's really solving a problem that isn't really too big of a problem, right? Whatever the fuck it is, something like, shit, I don't know, depression. Like, all right, everybody's going to hate me. Depression's a really serious thing. But okay, it's depression. But my point is, the side effects from the drug are worse than the freaking thing they're trying to cure a lot of the times. Like, okay, they talk about for 15 or 20 seconds how wonderful this drug is, and then they spend the rest of a 60-second commercial going over the side effects and precautions and saying things like, you could lose control of your bodily functions and death, or just, death, or all kinds of other side effects, that could happen from this drug that, it's to make freckles go away or some stupid thing. Isn't that important? You know what I mean? That's my point. And why is it that there was always this double standard that marijuana wasn't tested enough, but all these other things, like, let's let them go, like, fuck, I don't know. It's not like 5,000 years of human consumption of the cannabis plant isn't a long enough study.
That's what you're leading me to bullshit. Right there.
It's through the 70s, when I was growing up. I mean, I just think that the whole thing with the marijuana stigma, it was just try to keep it down. It was like, keep those people down. We don't want to give them too much power. They'll start questioning authority. because once they see the big lie, they've been telling them that this marijuana stuff is dangerous and so on. It's like, wait a second. It takes you all of about a minute to realize, like, this isn't a dangerous drug. It's a very natural plant that grows on the planet. And, anyway, why should it be any different than you have a vineyard, you're growing wine, you're growing grapes to make wine, or whatever. People grow fields full of grain to make alcohol. It was always unfair. And so it's only fair that now we just need a national legalization. That's the next thing. And people need to, in the states, places where we have legalized marijuana, and I mean, I use the term marijuana, I should say cannabis or whatever, but I mean smoking marijuana. So now that it's legal, well, we need places to socialize and smoke, and whatever, like they called coffee shops over in Amsterdam back when I started, and that kind of thing. And I don't really like the term dispensary, do you? I mean, it sounds so clinical. Like, I'm going to the dispensary to get, coffee shop, I mean, that doesn't really say it as clearly as it should be. A smoking lounge, or cannabis smoking lounge, or whatever you want to call it. And a friend of mine just started one in Denver, and I believe that's going to be huge, because of all the things that they fuck up, which they do a lot in legalization. This was the other point I was trying to make when I first had this thought, was that usually the people who determine the framework within which the legalization is going to be codified, laws are going to be made, or rules and regulations as to how the trade is done and so on. They're never people who ever had anything to do with cannabis and how we all consumed it and bought it and sold it, right? What the fuck do they know? They make up rules sometimes that don't even have a problem that needs to be solved for the rule. Like, biggest example is I'm a seed guy, right? Like, they'll have rules in a state when they become legal, and they say, yeah, people can grow the marijuana, but they can't import seeds from any other state, out of state. Wait a second. What problem would that, what problem are you trying to solve? Imagine that you could import seeds from other states into your state. Why would that cause a problem? What are you trying to solve? And on the converse argument, meaning look at it the other way, what advantages might you be blocking from coming into your state? There could be a strain. I don't think strain's the right name. We should probably get away from that. But a variety of marijuana could be created, and people are doing medical research all the time that fucking cures cancer, let's just say, right? For the fucking sake of argument. And now your state won't allow you to import those seeds. Does that make any sense at all? We have to get to where the structures for the marijuana legalization are formulated, and the people who decide how they're going to codify all of that, they need to have people like, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but somebody like myself who has the kind of experience and the years of being in the cannabis community and how it's produced and traded and thought of, and all of our customs and the customary ways that we're used to working with should have been thought of. And then only laws that solve a problem are there to solve those problems or enforce the the rights of individuals and so on. And what would be so hard about that? I just think that they blast ahead and start making up rules and creating systems. And it makes it more complicated than it has to be. Who wants to walk through their grow and be doing some pruning or something, and then you realize like all the leaves and stems and stuff got to go in a bag and bring it over here and weigh it and report that to the governing body that you took this much material off of those plants. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? You know, don't they know how this business works? So, you know, maybe one day, I doubt it. You know, that's just not the way government and politics works, is it? I mean, it's never going to be where they're going to realize, oh, there's the right way to do it, and let's just go and adopt some, you know, something that works, something that makes sense. But it's one of my pet peeves that it always seems like every time we do get legalization, I don't want to complain, we got legalization, right? They just don't know how to structure it in a way that makes any sense, and they don't seem to get the right people to be on those committees to make those kinds of decisions. So there, my little political rant on legalization. I think, though, on the positive side, you know, we should be thinking, won't be too long before you see a national legalization throughout the country. Certainly seems like the dominoes have fallen to a point where, shit, man, the rest of them are going to tip pretty easy. What do you think?
I've spoken of this quite a few times. I'm not so excited about the national legalization.
Tell
I'm
me
afraid
why.
at that point, I will be glad to. Well, I'm afraid that once it goes nationwide, the medical systems will get pushed into the background. Medical cards will cease to get pulled. The funding for research will kind of be limited, and moreover, they'll be trying to get rid of the home grows. The money that I believe that is pushing the legalization at this point isn't necessarily the homeland approach that I everybody wants to think it is. I think it's more or less big pharma and tobacco that's pushing legislation right now. And once they get their way, then they'll want to, of course, undercut the home growers so they can keep the profits and control the market like they have always had. It would be a win-win-win for the alcohol and tobacco and pharmacy market, because they still, well, the idea of cannabis as medicine, they could push in the background and still keep pumping out their poison. The business that they've lost from cigarettes, they can make up from recreational tobacco. And the same thing with alcohol. The money that they're losing from the recreational cannabis, they can regroup in a legal market and cannabis as well. So, and I'd love to see it legal, and I'm afraid that once it is nationwide, that all of us that, you know, built built this thing will be the ones that get screwed the most.
I think you're right on that level. You know, like the players are going to get thinned out to, you know, make way for large organizations that are going to run like a tobacco company and, you know, Coors Light, you know, or some mass-produced beer, you know. And, you know, if we look at beer as a analogy, maybe we could say, yeah, it's inevitable that it's going to be most of the market is going to be taken up by these bigger players that are making commercialized weed and weed products, right? But remember, the saving grace, I think, for all of us who are the true aficionados of cannabis and really love this, like, substance and community and everything that surrounds the smoking of marijuana and growing and so on, we're people who really appreciate the finer stuff. Like, who doesn't love talking about like their best weed they've ever smoked, and you'll pay a little bit more to get the primo buds and this kind of thing, right? Now, the analogy to the beer drinker, right? You know, your average Joe six-pack who comes home and buys a fucking six-pack, it's Coors Light or Budweiser or some shit beer, right? He'll sit back and knock back his six-pack and he's happy, and that's that. That's your average typical Joe, right? You're also going to have your Sam Adams drinker, you know, your guy who buys nothing but fucking imports. And there's always going to be a market for the boutique quality weed that's not only you know, a strain that people really want and respect and also that it's like grown organically and it's really great tasting and looks great bag appeal, and all of that other stuff that's not going to be that hugely available commercially available product is going to be shitty average quality. But for people who are interested in the high end and connoisseur, if you will, or boutique quality stuff, I think there's going to be a huge segment of the cannabis market that has to deal with these people. And I find the comfort in the knowledge that like that's kind of the tendency of the way that we all are. We like the finer things. We're what do you call it? Connoisseur is one word for it, but there's another word too that's evading me for the moment. But an Epicurean, right? Somebody who loves the tastes and sensations that the world has to offer for us as human beings, right? And that will be a not insignificant portion of the market for cannabis products, I think. Yeah, your average, chick who wants to jump in her convertible and drive off, and she's going to have a fucking electric e-lit lighter, kind of those things that, what do you call them, would have the cartridges in them. And I don't know if I'm just an old school guy, but that shit doesn't get me high to start anything. I mean, they're so lightweight, it's not even funny, but I'll talk to people, oh no, I get a really good buzz off of this thing. You okay, you do that in your little world, and I'm glad you're happy. But me, I like to smoke flower, right? Because I'm an old school, like 70s, 80s guy. It's when I grew up. And kids today tend to want to dab more, right? It's just a generational thing, perhaps, right? Am I speaking out of turn? So my experience has been the dabbing thing. I can appreciate it from time to time, but it's a little too extreme for me, both, in all the preparation and the torches, and it just looks a little off-putting. I don't know, that there's something about these torches going and glass rigs, and it just seems almost like you're shooting heroin or something in a room. It's just like dangerous shit. Not that it really is that, and don't get me wrong. I mean, there's just a psychological perception that when you see a room full of people dabbing, and it's like a huge cloud of smoke, and there's a torch, there's the sounds and the smells, and it just seems a lot more hardcore than a couple of guys like me sitting on the easy lazy boy chairs watching a game and passing a joint back and forth and bullshitting. Right? There's different levels. There's the girl with the e-cigarette, a total lightweight, right? Guys like me, old school, smoke a bong or a chillum or a joint, and then you got the kids today that all want to dab everything. So whatever makes you, whatever floats your boat.
I think the kids have lost appreciation for good flower because they've been brought up in the age of dabs. So that's what they prefer. I don't think they really have the feel for good flower and the buzz it could provide for them. I think that's got a lot to do with it. They're just going with what they know and what they've been introduced with versus, wanting to take some time and smoke some good flower.
Yeah, I've got an assistant who's 28 years old or something like that, and he even though stays with me, works with me, and there's no shortage of weed around, he'll still go off to a dispensary to get some kind of dab material, whatever you call that shit. How do you call it? Dab materials, right? There's a lot of names for it. They have diamonds and it changes all the time. Whatever's in fashion, it doesn't stay in fashion very long. I got here about 6 years ago in Colorado, and everybody was doing shatter, right? You hardly ever talk about shatter anymore. Now it's some kind of diamonds and whatever.
Diamonds, sauce and diamonds.
Yeah,
Of course,
diamonds
you
and
got
sauce.
rosins. And all that good
Rosin,
stuff. You're
right. Rosin. You got all that stuff, man. And you know that pressing the keef and squishing it to make the dab material.
So
whatever that is, that
how do
rosin.
you, as a major influencer in the cannabis market, I mean, how do you? I mean, you kind of led yourself up to that question, but how do you feel about the approaching major market? Do you prefer to see the comfort of larger orders, or are you gonna miss? Because at that point, your work will be out there and it will be more available at the provisioning centers we both don't like. Or are you gonna miss the cred of the 100,000 growers that grow out your flower, and it means so much more to them than just a product that they bought at the
I look at
store?
it.
I
I
mean,
mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I've been around long enough, and I've been, associated with marijuana since I was a teenager, and that's a long time ago. And I've watched the progression of how it's used and how it's talked about and how laws are surrounding its use and, people growing and smoking and everything. So I feel like I've had a lot of experience and maybe have a feeling for where things could go. But in my position as owner of Brothers Graham Seeds and being, someone who enjoys the finer quality marijuana and things like that. And like I spoke to you earlier about the fact that there'll always be a boutique quality sect, if you will, that's going to want that better stuff. The Sam Adams drinker versus the Coors Light drinker. The guy who buys the import beer. We're going to have a pretty large section of our people, our community that finds themselves there and less likely to buy, the commercial low-grade mids. In fact, look at how our whole community even talks in our language. It's like, oh man, those are mids, and everybody is all about the quality of the weed, and we're not very forgiving, or we're not going to just tolerate, well, I used to smoke real high grade weed, but nowadays, I'm perfectly satisfied with this mids that they put out. Nobody's going to do that. There's still going to be a very strong demand and desire by us to get the better stuff, right? And so now come back around full circle to me as a business owner. Would I like to be able to sell hundreds and thousands of seeds to the commercial growers? Of course, that's a huge segment of the business. And at the same time, do I think that that'll necessarily eliminate the people who want to grow in their closets and buy a pack of seeds once in a while from the website? No, there's always going to be that sector too. I mean, the demographics are broken up in a different way where there's a place for everybody at the table. I mean, maybe I'm being hyper optimistic or an old hippie or something, and everybody's joining hands and singing Kumbaya in my mind, but I think there is room at the table for everybody, all the different styles. Just like I've always said, as a breeder in a seed company, I don't look at other seed companies like their competition any more than, Sting looks at Celine Dion as competition or something. They're just two different bands that play different fucking music, right? It's not a competition. There's room for everybody at the table. And there's going to be people who love what I do and people who love what Sting does. And, Celine Dion sells a hell of a fucking lot of records still. And yet, the reputation is half joking, I just think even if in a big way, most of the business starts to be commercial guys with big companies making lots of product at a low price and a low quality or whatever the fuck it turns into, just like beer, you're not going to be forced to drink that shit. You'll still be able to get your high quality imported beers and your Sam Adams and your, local breweries and so on. And that cult of quality is always going to be part of the marijuana experience, in my opinion. I cannot remember ever going anywhere where marijuana was bought and sold, where the price and the excitement generated by the weed wasn't a function of how powerful it was or how good of a quality it was, right? You know, I've heard people say, hey, can you get me 100 pounds of weed? And I'll be like, well, if I did, you know, what would be the price you're willing to pay for this 100 pounds of weed? Well, you know, we have a set price. It's like whatever the fuck they offer, $1,200 or something a pound. But I don't remember. It's been a while since I ever did anything like that. So I'm saying, but if I got you weed, it would have to be like $2,500 a pound because of the quality of it. It's like, oh no, quality isn't even, it doesn't even come into it. We have a set price. We pay $1,200 a pound. I'm like, when have you in your life ever been in a situation where marijuana was being bought or sold where the price was not in accordance with the quality of the weed? It just doesn't make any sense. How can these guys do that? Of course, I wouldn't sell anything to these guys, you know, they're set price guys. So my point, I guess, is that there's always going to be that, you know, the higher level commercial Budweiser people, you know, Johnny Sixpack who comes home from work and, you know, cracks a few beers and slaps a wife and kicks his dog and goes to bed, you know. And then there's the guy who really, you know, cherishes the experience and he buys an imported Belgian beer. There's only 4 in the whole pack, not 6, because, you know, it's expensive and it's really tasty and it's, you know, higher alcohol content or whatever. And the guy makes sure that it's at the right temperature. When he takes it out of the refrigerator, he puts it in the proper glass before he drinks it. I mean, there's these different kinds of people. And maybe there's a lot more of, you know, the Joe average Johnny Sixpacks, but there's going to be a large segment of, you know, the connoisseur consumer. So I wouldn't be too concerned like they're going to push out all the good stuff and you're going to be left with nothing but mids, you know, and that's all you can buy. Does that make any sense?
It does, but I mean, that leads me to my next question. What do you, we've talked about, you know, the effects on the smaller guy if recreational or cannabis goes legal from coast to coast, but what effects is it going to have on the big guys? Is it going to be a complete reset of what we've seen so far? I mean, the mom and pops, they get shaken out one more time before they can actually get a foot in the market because, you know, the
you
feds
mean
come
like
in and
that
reset
there would
all
be
the rules.
I see where you're going. You're saying, like, would they get aggressive because they want to corner the market and have everything and not even allow home growers to grow? There's already some waves of that happening. I mean, yeah, you might have a point because aren't there some states right now that have just recently legalized, and they're also instituting programs where, you know, like home growers are limited greatly, and it's an obvious ploy to get them to have to buy from the commercial guy, right? You know, like, would it be fair if your grocery store, you know, said you're not allowed to grow your own tomatoes and lettuce in your backyard because, you know, that'll cut into our business? No, I mean, I don't know how far they can take that, you know.
Well, in Michigan right now, actually, they're trying to do all of that. I mean, they've already expressed their wants to take away the homegrown period. As caregivers here in Michigan, we're allotted 5 patients plus ourselves. Now they want to limit it to us having to just take care of 1 patient. So they're actually wanting us to like have to weigh out our patients and go, okay, you guys don't count, you do. But you know what I am like that, and that's all on a state level right now.
Yeah.
But they all have to come together and agree something. The federal could come over and reset even what the states are doing right now. for is on a large scale. Okay, now all you guys have to meet up to our requirements, and nobody does current. Everybody start over. Now that's a realization that could happen as well.
Well, I guess if I were you, in your state, and when you're seeing things like that happening, I'd be, staying on aware of what's going on. And if you could have any influence, like I was saying earlier, a lot of times I believe these legalization schemes are drawn up and, they put people on these committees who really aren't qualified. They don't know anything about how we did for decades, grow, smoke, and distribute marijuana. They should have folks who already understand how that normally works when it's not legal, and then figure out a nice way to make it, work as a legal entity. And in the same way, the concerns you're having would be addressed, because these people would be right there. Okay, wait a second, before you try to pass laws like that, don't you realize that the way this works is this is a substance that we've all been enjoying, in the shadows and prohibition, in a certain way that has had enough time to evolve to where this is actually how it works naturally. This is how, if nature takes its course, this is how it works. The guy who wants the weed goes to the guy who's got the weed, he buys the weed, he brings it home, and the guy who has the weed to sell, where's he getting it from? Well, it has to be grown by somebody, it has to be processed by somebody, it has to get in the hands of the dealer, so all of those steps that were done illegally before they have to change in a way where there's a legal framework, but the flow has to still kind of be maintained, you know what I mean? And improved, like this buying of marijuana and then finding some place to go off and surreptitiously smoke it in private and, secret, all that can change. We can have smoking lounges, maybe pool hall or something where you can, play pool, bowl, smoke weed, dance, play music, those kinds of normal things that people enjoy. Just because we bought marijuana, does that mean we have to take it home and go hide somewhere to smoke it? I think that that's very unnatural, and that's a part of the legal framework that's got to change, and quick too. I mean, the Dutch knew right away that this isn't something where you just sell it and tell people to go home and find a private place where nobody can watch you do it. I mean, they're going to want to hang with others that are of their same, that like the same things. So lots of room for improvement. Lots of room for improvement. It's getting late for this old guy. I'm going to probably have to sign off. If you can, do it in a way where nobody's disappointed that I ran off too soon. Let's see what we can do here in the next few minutes.
Oh, I don't care if anybody's disappointed. I don't think they could be.
It's my show,
two good hours. We've had 2 good hours. If there's anything left, and as I've told you many times before, I enjoy my visits with you. I would much rather leave on a positive note.
It's a pretty relaxed conversation.
Bank up. Yeah, I would rather bank whatever they have for another great episode versus.
I got to get myself a little something. My throat's getting dry. I need a drink, and I'll take another refresher here before settling down for the night.
Well, let me remind you of a few things. I would like to get a sound bite for you from me again before you go. Can't have an episode without that.
Okay, what do you want to hear?
And I would like to remind you that the link that you have is the link for the panel show. Monday nights are what we could now call it's taken a few name changes, but it is now Weed Nerd World is the panel show. Monday nights is a mandatory Weed Nerd World. And any nights like tonight, where the time slot for the show is usually 11:30 to 4:20. So when the guests or we don't go the full length, you'd be surprised how many times we actually do go to 4:20. But when we don't, what I do is I'll end this episode, the spotlight, and then I'll pick up with a wee nerd world, and that's open to all past guests. So 506.
So I could show up on
any-
a Monday night. Is that what you're telling me? I could show
Yeah,
up on a Monday night and join in
anytime.
the party. I might consider doing
Yeah.
that. You know, it's always fun talking with you. I really enjoy this too. And I'm real happy to have been able to say, you know, the things that we've been able to talk about tonight. And if we honestly hit, you know, the majority of all the questions, and there wasn't anything that was like a really like, oh, we got to hear the answer to this, you know, and don't let them off the show yet, you know. I guess I'm good.
But there's a couple that don't let him go, but you know,
Don't
like
let
I
them
said,
go. I got this one last question, you know, like, what's your favorite method of germinating a seed? I'm like,
careful what you ask for, sir.
Right.
Careful what you ask for.
Mhm.
Yes, sir. So with that being said, I'd like to get the soundbite. The soundbite goes, you know, basically, hi, I'm Eagle, and I'm on fucking Talking Shit with Eagle, episode 506.
Is that my
you can
number
put
this
whatever
time,
you want.
506?
Yes, sir. You can put whatever you want with that. Make it your own. And
Is
here
it
we
gonna
go.
be-
We are recording.
This is
Yeah.
Mr. Soul from Brothers Grimm Seeds. I've just enjoyed a couple hours of talking shit with Eagle, and I hope to be back again. This was my third time on the show. Do check us out at brothersgrimmseeds.com. That's brothers, plural, Grimm with 2 M's, seeds, plural.com. The website's being kept up pretty good lately, and I sure hope to be talking to y'all and that you enjoyed our chat tonight. I sure did, and I'll say goodnight until next time. Mr. Soul, Brothers Grimm Seeds.
Awesome. Thank you for that sound bite. They're saying in chat, drag him into the world. Drag him into the world.
Into what world?
The weed nerd world. The weed
Oh,
nerd
yeah.
world.
Monday nights?
They'd
That
love.
sounds like a good time. I might check it out real soon. Really, seriously.
I hope so. I hope
All
so.
right, dude.
I
Well,
value
Eagle,
your time
you're a good
100%.
man.
I respect you in more ways than you know. Thank you for
Please.
joining in, my friend.
Thanks again. Thanks to everybody who came in. Talk to y'all soon. Thanks again.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye. Thanks again, Mr. Soul, for joining us tonight. I always enjoyed speaking to him. No, that is no doubt. So that does end this portion of the evening. Hopefully you'll use the restroom, fill your trays, all that good stuff, and get ready for another Weed Nerd World. If not, well, thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate that 100%. Please take time to do something nice for somebody. Random acts of kindness do save lives. Everybody needs help at some point in their life. If they're willing to admit it or not, don't be afraid to reach out. You guys, hopefully I'll see you soon in a few minutes in the Weird Nerd World. If not, see you tomorrow night.